Alrighty, folks, welcome back to Eagles Power Hour, your official, unofficial Eastern Washington affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. And thankfully, I don't sound extremely depressed. I mean, I'm still a little depressed because of this last weekend, which we all know about and we're about to talk about now. Drake beats Eastern Washington in Cheney. Non-scholarship Drake that is notorious for losing by 20 to 30 points or 20 to 30 points against 30 to 50 points against every scholarship team they've played in the last 2 years. And they came into Roos and beat up on Eastern Washington. Not like beat up as in blew out, which is, I mean, good, but they definitely played better than Eastern Washington on Saturday. And wow, yeah, one of the most, there is a new most disappointing, most embarrassing loss in program history, in my opinion. And that was last Saturday, man. Letting a Pioneer League school come into your house and beat you on the red, that was pretty embarrassing, man. Let's just, I mean, yeah, I mean, straight up, man, that was really bad. And full disclosure, I've recorded this like 3 or 4 times. I tried to record it the night of, I couldn't. I was too upset, and I kept doom rambling. That I tried to record it 2 days later, right after I watched all the film. Couldn't do it. Was too upset. Kept doom rambling. So we're gonna try to be a little less doom and gloom than I was in the last 2 episodes, which is gonna be kind of crazy because I'm gonna be talking a lot of doom and gloom here. It was pretty bad. So, this game was it really was a tale of just poor execution on all parts for Eastern Washington, man. Eastern, I mean, the offense scored 32 points, but it needed more firepower. The defense couldn't get a stop when they needed a stop. They gave up 13 second quarter points, which is just we can't do that. Drake is a school that averaged something like 15 points a game last year. We gave up 35 points a game, up 35 points in this game. And my takeaway right after watching the game was like, right after I was on the sideline as a ball boy for that game, and my takeaway right away was like, man, it feels like our offense just could not get going, and that's kind of true. I mean, they were consistent in that it was 7 points, 7.7 points, 8 points, per quarter. It was pretty consistent, but when it came down to like the big moment, as in overtime, it was kind of a microcosm of the inconsistency of this Eastern team on offense that game. We'll start with the offense side of things, anyways. Is what I'm trying to get at here. We'll get to the defense later. The defense, I mean, watching it back, holy shit. Anyways, man, offensively, man, Kikoa, I love the dude. He is so much fun to watch, and he is an electric player. But he really, I mean, the he just did not look great in this game, in my opinion. He did have decent stats in terms of like efficiency wise. He was 21 for 26, 177 yards through the air, no picks, but he did get sacked 3 times, and I'm fully blaming all 3 of those sacks on Kikoa. All 3 of those sacks, there was an easy check down to throw the ball to, and Kikoa just tried to do a little bit too much, and wasn't, he was looking downfield, not looking to get the ball out. He was trying to get out of the pocket, fell, whatever. Not a huge deal. I mean, but that is a Kikoa thing that has been upsetting sometimes. Is I do wish he would take the check down more often sometimes, which is kind of weird because he also has not looked great throwing the ball down the field, which also was kind of a frustrating thing in this game. Kikoa, he just didn't look that good throwing the ball medium to long distances, like medium to long yardages, anyways. He had, one pretty nice play where he rolled out on an RPO and threw a nice little ball to a streaking Efton Chisholm down the sideline. Efton Chisholm ran for 67 yards and tackled in like the 5-yard line, called back for a hold. There's one. And then you had a few other plays where, I mean, Miles Williams was open for explosive plays twice in this game. Both times, Kikoa threw it and it was just a tad off and gave the defender a chance to make the play, and they did. Hats off to Drake's defense because they really did come to play. They're not I mean, I'm not willing to say they're a good FCS defense, like, nationally. No. I mean, they're still a non-scholarship defense, but of the non-scholarship defenses, I think they might be the best. But they really did play their asses off, and they really keyed in on Efton Chisholm, man. Um, I think they looked at the film and they're like, "Hey, don't let seven beat us, and we'll be all right. Make Kikoa throw the ball down the field, we'll be all right." And I mean, that was kind of what ended up ended up doing it for them on the defensive side of things. Uh, Bright spot of this Eastern offensive performance was definitely the run game. The run game looked pretty dang good. Eastern ran the ball for about 4 yards a clip, 4.5 yards a clip, and that's including sacks and the Landon Ogles drop snap that we'll hit on in a minute. That includes all of the negative yardage from sacks and all that stuff. Which, I mean, Kiko lost 17 yards on sacks. Wortham lost 5 yards, 14 yards on the Ogles thing. So, I mean, the net rushing performance for Eastern Washington was 206 yards. Pretty solid, breaking 200 yards a clip. Decent. 200 yards for the game is pretty good. 200, just shy of 250 yards gained on the day without the sacks and lost yardage in there. So, I mean, it was a good performance on the ground. Michael Wortham had 2 rushing touchdowns. Both of those were just little, sweep type things. But Tuna Alta here definitely, and the offensive line were absolutely the players of the game offensively for Eastern Washington. Tuna looked like really good running the ball. He's doing a good job in the open field, just making guys miss, which is something that he struggled with a little bit in the past. Malik Dotson has become more of the short yardage back that kind of runs through you rather than around you. And Tuna's kind of the in between. He's becoming more of an around you than through you. But he does both. He's a running back. That's what they do. They had Alter here had 12 attempts for 94 yards on the ground and a touchdown. He had a long of 22, averaged almost 8 yards carry. Tuna looked really good. Kind of scary news. We don't necessarily know if he's going to play this week. He left at one point in the game, wincing, kind of grabbing his side after getting tackled. I wonder if it was a ribs issue. It kind of looked like a ribs issue. I don't think he ever returned after that, if I'm remembering right. He was not present in the overtime period. So I'm wondering if he might have messed a rib up or something like that. He might need the week off, which is not ideal. Malik Dotson looked good in spurts as well. He averaged just shy of 5 yards a carry. He had nine carries, 46 yards. He netted 43 yards. He had a long of 14. He was consistently getting 5 yards a carry. The offensive line looked really good. They were dominating up front for the most part. I mean, there's a few plays where Claypool made some good plays for them, number 9. But offensively, I think the offensive line and the blocking was absolutely a bright spot. Also, shout out to Nate Bell. He's a younger quarterback that got in and to kind of replaced I don't know if he's injured or just not playing Jared Taylor. Jared Taylor did not suit up for this game. He's typically the quote unquote short yardage quarterback that comes in and they have their whole package with him in there where he just kind of runs it like a little bit of Tommy Malott style. That's what Nate Bell did in this game once. He went, one attempt for 11 yards. Looked good doing that as well. But man, Michael Wortham, he had 11 attempts for 46 yards. He was not as consistent on the ground. And I think that's just kind of what you're going to get with Michael Wortham's package. I think the problem with Michael Wortham's package is just when 6 is in the ball game, what's happening. It's a run, and it's almost always going to go to Michael Wortham. And so it really allows teams to stack the hell out of the box because there isn't the throwing threat there. I'm starting to really question the Michael Wortham at quarterback usage. I kind of want to see him used more as a running back, more as a slot receiver type of a player. Use him on the jet sweeps and stuff like that. I haven't loved the Michael Wortham at quarterback experience a ton this year, but I mean, he's one hell of a player, dude. And I mean, he makes the big plays. He had 2 touchdown runs in this one, and you could see it. You can see how explosive that dude is, but I don't know if he's best used as a true quarterback in this Eastern offense, anyways. Unless they let him throw the ball a little bit, which I don't know if he has quite the arm to do. I mean, we haven't seen it, so we don't really know. But you got to think there's a reason they don't let him throw very often, and you know, it turns him into just a wildcat quarterback. And so I definitely have my questions with that. I don't know if it's the most effective way to use Mike. So I would love to see him more at the tailback position or at the slot receiver, use him in the sweep game and stuff like that. I'm repeating myself. Anyways, that was the one kind of blunder on the run game for me, as well as Mike had a fumble late that it's a situation where he can't fumble. It was under 4 minutes ago. He fumbled the ball back to Drake when I believe they went and tied the game up off of his fumble, if I'm not mistaken, which I might be wrong. I can't remember. I can't remember if that was before they or after they tied it up or when they tied it up was off of the fumble. But anyways, the fumble, he did fumble twice in this game, which is something you got to worry about a little bit. I mean, he fumbled on the kick, I think it was the opening kick return or second kickoff return or something. He fumbled the ball out of bounds. Looked like it was real Drake ball on the field, and then it got reversed because it was recovered out of bounds. Anyways, got to hold on to the ball, Mike. Come on now. Anyways, but like we kind of covered a minute ago, the downside of this offensive performance was absolutely the passing game that looked so good in the Monmouth game. And what you saw in this game is, hey, Drake was dead set on not letting Efton Chisholm get the ball one-on-one in space. That was their number one goal, it looked like for me, is their safeties. If Chisholm was in the slot, they had a safety driving on the short Chisholm route every time, which is why Chisholm got open a couple times deep. But, I think they really, really keyed in on that, the little bubbles and the little stop routes that Chisholm was able to get one-on-ones in the Monmouth game where, he makes a guy miss and all of a sudden it's a 12-yard gain. Uh, this game, he was catching the ball and getting tackled immediately, catching the ball and having two guys to have to make miss, which is a lot tougher than making one guy miss. Which is why his efficiency wasn't near what it was. He did have 9 receptions for 65 yards and a touchdown. I mean, it's not an awful stat line, but he did get 35 of those yards on one play, which when you look at, what 8 divided by 30, let's do some quick math here. 30 divided by 8, that's 3.5 yards a catch. That's not very good, man. And I mean, Chisholm had some huge plays wiped off the board by penalties, which I'll cover in a minute. But that definitely wasn't ideal. Malik Dotson looked really good in the screen game, as well as I liked what I saw from JUCO transfer Noah Cronquist. He had a 5-yard catch on the screenplay, but he looks like, my concern with him was like, will he be physically there and like fast enough? He's there. Noah Cronquist is there. I'd love to see him a little bit more this next week, but the screen game looked good for Malik Dotson, and Michael Wortham had a few catches for a few yards as well. But, overall, it's just we weren't able to stretch the field really, like at all. There's a few plays where, Chisholm had 2 long balls that he caught and was able to run for a lot of yards. One of them got called back. The other one didn't. Miles Williams was open twice for what should have been huge chunk plays or touchdowns. And Kikoa just didn't put the ball in the right place and gave the defender a chance to make the play. And it was the offense just did not execute very well. Overall, they just did not execute very well. They did put up, off running the ball, they looked great, but just through the air, we did not look like Eastern Washington in the way that typically an Eastern team is able to pretty efficiently move the ball down the field through the air. Which I mean, unless we can hit a couple of deep shots this next week, I think that's going to be a similar story. It's going to be really tough to get Chisholm one-on-ones in the flat because I think everybody's going to key in on Chisholm now. He's going to be getting everyone's biggest attention, all week this week, and so or all season now. And so I think the other receivers in the room are going to have to really uh, take a lot of load. And I think the talent is there. When you think about a guy like Miles Williams, that dude, he's open all the time. He just, for whatever reason, man, he just has not quite clicked with Kikoa. I don't know what the deal is. It's like they're just a tick off a lot of the time. When Miles had one very nice play for an 18-yard gain, he just okey doke the corner, kind of from Chisholm style. But I mean, the other thing is Kikoa's got to not always be looking for Chisholm. I mean, I understand that he's a very reliable target, but there's a few times where he tried to force the ball into Chisholm, and Chisholm was double covered. There's a wide open tight end underneath, or wide open. Nolan Olm had a few spots where he was wide open, didn't get the ball. I mean, we don't know what the health status of Nolan Olm is right now. He left the Drake game. He, I guess, lost his helmet midway through, and just or not lost his helmet, but someone took his helmet midway through and he didn't return. He was still in uniform on the sideline, but just no helmet. Don't know why, but that happened. The moral of the story is Kikoa's got to be able to connect with the deep ball at least once or twice a game, or teams are going to be able to just really, really key in on the short game. And that's how Eastern does. That's how Eastern is built on getting yards. Is nickel and diamond it down the field, running the ball, kind of West Coast-y style, and then hopefully hitting one over the top every once in a while. That's where Kikoa really needs to improve, in my opinion. Okay. Now let's hit on the defensive side of things. It was kind of a disappointing effort defensively for Eastern. And not necessarily. I mean, the rushing defense was good. It really was. They only allowed 67 yards on the ground. I mean, that's usually what we're worried about. Their second leading. Oh, excuse me, no. They had two running backs, 8 attempts for 25 yards for Dorian Boyland. He had one touchdown as well. Luke Woodson had 5 carries for 24 yards. Blake Ellingson, their backup quarterback, or their second quarterback, backup quarterback, whatever, had 3 carries for 13 yards. He looks okay, but solid. Their quarterback, Luke Bailey, had 4 carries for 10 yards. Again, like nothing crazy. They were not running the ball well on us. We're definitely the bigger and more talented front. Where they were able to move the ball on us was, one, the sweep, the pop pass sweep. They were able to get rip some chunks off with that multiple times. Pretty easy, big chunk plays. They ran it to a lot of receivers, actually. They ran it to Mitchell January. They ran it to Trey Ricotta, and they ran it to Taj Hughes. They ran it to all 3 of those guys. And, all 3 of them, or they might have not ran it to Ricotta, but they were definitely ran it to January and Taj Hughes, as well as someone else too. But they're able to just rip off chunks on the edges, the sweeps. Deshaun Misa has played those sweeps pretty well from his edge spot. That edge / outside linebacker, he's played him pretty well. The other guys have struggled at times with that. Particularly Voigt and Trevor Thurman have both had a tough time containing that sweep and that pop pass jet type thing that they ran. I mean, that's been something that has killed Eastern for years now. It's really tough, but really that wasn't what beat Eastern though. What beat Eastern was Eastern. The defense, again, guys, like particularly in the second half, the busted coverages were horrendous. The amount of busted coverages was just, it's just bad. It's really bad, guys. I'm pretty disappointed. And this was similar to the Monmouth game where down the stretch we had a couple busted coverages. And I mean, most of the busted coverages were young guys, like, redshirt freshmen getting in their first or second game. And you're like, okay, it's week 1. Robertson's a pretty solid quarterback. He saw that and took advantage of it. Okay, cool. But you got to think against a Drake, we're going to be able to iron some of those things out and hopefully look pretty good defensively. I mean, my main goal, we were good. Sub 100 yards rushing. That was pretty sweet. But 393 yards through the air. And that pop pass sweep counts as a pass every time because they threw it forward. So That's what a big chunk of this was. Taj Hughes had 11 receptions, and most of those probably were that sweep, if I'm remembering right. But yeah, the busted coverages, guys, the busted coverage just killed us. Absolutely killed us. And this is where I'm getting pretty frustrated with with Coach Eric Sanders, man, because that stuff cannot happen. I understand, he really wants to run some kind of disguised coverages and interesting coverages to try and force interceptions, force turnovers, which is important for Eastern style of defenses. They're not going to be a brick wall ever. I don't think Eastern will ever be that brick wall type defense. But it's just we can't be running such an exotic coverage package that even our guys can't figure it out, because that's what it seemed like the last 2 weeks down the stretch anyways. And I mean, DeGene Wells, number 3, has looked like a true shutdown corner the last 2 weeks. Shout out to him. Everyone else, man, they have had some really bad moments on the secondary side of things. Almost everyone has had a busted coverage where they missed an assignment, or they thought it was a run, came up and crashed, and then all of a sudden they're throwing it. Or there's one play where it looks like DeGene Wells got beat, but he plays it just like he has a safety over the middle, and there's just no safety there. I don't know. That was the 63-yard. I think it was a touchdown grab for Trey Ricotta, or something close to a touchdown, anyways, for Trey Ricotta. DeGene Wells plays him outside leverage the whole way, like he has a deep middle safety, which I think he was supposed to have, and that safety just was nowhere to be found. Don't know where he was. Who knows? So it's just the busted coverages, man. That's the main thing that we gotta clean up. Otherwise, the defenders in the box look okay, but it's Drake. They're supposed to look okay. The pass rush looked okay. We did get 1 sack. I hats off to frickin' Luke Bailey, man, because he played pretty well. He did make some really good throws that impressed the hell out of me, I will say. I definitely ate crow on the he's not a Division I arm type thing that I said. Wow. He played pretty dang well. But I don't know, man. To me, this one was Eastern's defense beating Eastern's defense. This wasn't Drake out scheming Eastern's defense. The sweep was good scheming for them, and we got to play better on that. But other than that, Eastern's defense really only gave up yards with busted coverages and penalties. And oh boy, don't get me started on the penalties in this game, which absolutely destroyed Eastern Washington, man. So when it comes to just general penalty yardage, I believe Eastern was, let's scroll and get to the actual. Yeah, so Drake had 11 penalties for 75 yards. Eastern had 10 penalties for 115 yards. That's just the penalty yardage, just the backing them up. There was some huge plays wiped away by these penalties. To kick it off, 42-yard punt return by Efton Chisholm got called back for a block in the back. That was that crazy play where 2 players lost their helmets. Drake got a participating participating without a helmet penalty. Eastern got a stupid block in the back penalty. There was like 8 flags, 2 hats, and a freaking 2 helmets on the field at the same time. It was crazy. But anyways, 42-yard punt return called back. Then next play, Chisholm goes off for a 15-yard punt return. Gets called back for a hold. That's minus 25 yards from where we should have been. On the 42-yarder, that's minus 57 yards from where the ball should have been. Let's see. 15-yard horse collar penalty by Miles Mayowski turned a 11-yard scamper by I think it was on the sweep again. 11-yard run. Cool. Chunk yardage. It's not ideal, but cool. Turns it into a 26-yard gain because of a stupid penalty. Miles got a little bit of a hand of the horse collar as he was falling out of bounds. Whatever. Sucks that happened, but all of a sudden put them in Eastern Territory, and they're driving after that. A 67-yard pass to Efton Chisholm got called back for an ineligible man downfield. Now, would this play have happened? I mean, if would this play have stood if our ineligible man wasn't downfield? Yes, but it was an RPO. I can't really blame the offensive lineman for being downfield. I mean, he's thinking it's a run. He doesn't see the ball go over his head, so he keeps blocking like it's a run. I'm not gonna blame him for that. There was also a couple. I mean, we had another ineligible man downfield where one of our center just like ran down the middle of the field on a pass play, and it's like, what are we doing? A 15-yard pass, roughing the passer, turned a 13-yard reception into a 20-yard play. 15-yard late hit out of bounds by Derek Ganter, which, I mean, he launched when the quarterback was still inbounds. Then he landed out of bounds. He hit him when he was out of bounds, but he already launched when he was inbounds. I wouldn't have called it a 15-yarder, but I'm also biased, and I'm a defensive guy. I don't really. I mean, I didn't think it should have been a 15-yarder, but you're hitting their quarterback a little bit late out of bounds. Yeah, they're going to call that. Knowing another 15-yard penalty, it puts him into field goal range, whatever. 12-yard Michael Wortham run got called back for holding, and another 15-yard PI put Drake in Eastern Territory to tie the game with a minute and a half left. That is 176 total yards negated just on these plays that I call out here. That's not including all of them. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's only 8 of the 10 penalties. I missed a couple of them, but a couple of the accepted penalties anyways. That's so much yardage, dude. That's probably, I mean, when you have the other penalties in there, that's 200 yards, dude. 200 yards of offense called back for penalties. That's horrible, dude. I mean, 200 yards of yardage negative for Eastern. I don't know if I don't remember if that is the defensive penalties included or not. But that's 60 yards of negative defensive penalties that turned 28 yards of Drake offense into 88 yards. That is like half of a Northern Colorado output, as Brian Morso put it the other day. I mean, just absolutely brutal on the penalty front, and that's got to be cleaned up. Another side of things, Landon Ogles at punter had a very, very much an up and down game, mostly down with one up. He had a couple just shanks of punts. I don't know what happened there, or at least he had one. Let's see, he had one shank that was pretty tough, but he did land 3 punts inside the 20. He averaged 43.5 yards per punt, which is good. But then late in the game, when we're trying to pin that in deep to, kind of ice it and force overtime, he just dropped the snap. Late in the fourth quarter, our punter just drops the snap. And then our own player recovered it and ran, but it ended up, making it a -5 play turnover on downs. And now Drake got the ball in Eastern Territory with under a minute and something left, with a chance to go tie the game, or a chance to go win the game in regulation. I mean, that was just, it can't happen. Having putting the ball on the ground twice in the final 4 minutes is just unbelievable. We cannot be doing that. That's not winning football. That's not how you win games like that. That's very much not ideal for any team that expects to win games, I should say, excuse me. But yeah, man. I mean, it was just so frustrating because Eastern, when you watch the film and you watch the one-on-one matchups, Eastern just dominated Drake all day. Just dominated Drake all day, especially in the box. And it just felt like we went away from it. Offensively, we were behind the chains. We were in 1st and 20s, 2nd and 10s way too often. Makes it really hard to be able to, do the 5 yards a clip type of offense that Eastern likes to run when you're behind the chains. But yeah, man. 4 of 14 on third down. Or 5 of 14 on third down for Eastern. 0 for 2 on fourth down conversions. One of those was the punt, which, wasn't great. Also gave the ball to Drake on like the 50 by not getting a fourth down conversion. Let's see. Yeah, 3 sacks for Drake to Eastern's none. And I think, like I said earlier, I think all 3 of those were kind of Kikoa's fault. Kikoa was trying to do too much with it and got caught from behind when he was trying to roll out. You know, and I mean Kikoa, he's still kind of young, but I mean he's only got this year, next year. He's not a freshman anymore. That's a play that you gotta be able to, be smart. Either get rid of the ball or just get it to a check down, man. Throw the ball away, get it to check down. You can't be giving up 3 sacks to Drake, man. Just yeah, man. Those sacks just stalled drives. The holding penalties stalled drives. The throwing a ball to Efton Chisholm and he runs backwards for 3 yards, stalled drives. I just, all around it was just a pretty tough effort, man. A few individual plays where you just see, it definitely felt like Eastern was overlooking Drake, which we all were, man. I can't blame them. But, I don't get paid to not overlook an opponent. I don't get my school paid for to, play football. It definitely felt like we were trying to hide our hand from the schools we play these next few weeks. And in turn, we beat ourselves. Kind of like how Eastern is able to beat teams like a Oregon State and a Washington State in the FBS, or make things close with a Washington State or Washington and whatever FBS school, when Eastern's able to make things close with a Power 5 school, it's usually because they play like Eastern did today or did Saturday. And so, very disappointing, very, very disappointing. That buffers our season expectations a lot because we really, really needed that win. And now you have to go probably close to 500 in the stretch of Nevada, Montana, UC Davis, Sac State, Idaho, and Montana State. Those are 6 games that you have to probably win 3 of them for a chance at the playoffs, especially when you have a resume blunder like losing to Drake there. So now if you're looking at playoffs, Eastern has to probably beat Nevada. Almost certainly has to beat Nevada because you kind of need the resume bump of an FBS win to counteract the Drake loss. And then you probably have to beat, you kind of have to try, I think you have to beat one of the Montana schools. I think you kind of have to. I think you really have to. Or, I don't know if this team can really make the playoffs anymore unless you beat Sac State, Davis, and Idaho. But man, it's gonna be an uphill battle now. It was gonna be an uphill battle already. With that stretch of games, but I felt that Eastern had the potential to beat some of those teams, and I still think they do. But they have to play decent, and they have to be lined up right on defense, man. I think that's enemy number 1 right now has been the scheme, like lining up and being correct, being in the right place at the right time has absolutely been Eastern's number 1 problem when it comes to defense. So, I think that's enough ranting on the Drake loss. Most embarrassing loss I've ever seen in program history, and I think this is one that could be looked at as the beginning of the end for Coach Best's era if things are not turned around like ASAP, because I just the last 3 years there has been a new most kind of embarrassing loss for us, for Eagle fans. 2022, there was that Portland State game at home when Portland State came and ran and took the damn cup away from us and freaking ran all over the red. And, they came in and kind of whooped our ass on the red. 2023, you have the collapse in Pocatello, where Eastern had a 42-15 or 42-13 lead, 42-14, something like that. Ended up losing the game. And then you have losing to Drake on the red in overtime. I think every year has been embarrassing, even more embarrassing. Now this is the most embarrassing I've seen, losing to a team that lost to an NAIA school last year. So, it's tough times, but I still think this Eastern team has potential to be pretty decent. I still think this Eastern team has potential to be a middle of the pack to at least a middle of the pack Big Sky school. I mean, especially if the defense can turn a few things around, which, I think they can, because their issue isn't getting beat. Their issue is being lined up. Like it's easy, simple shit. Like just getting in your zone, just matching up with the right guy. That's Eastern's number one problem right now on defense. Offensively, it's just Kikoa's got to hit a couple throws. Honestly, I'm not more concerned about the offense after this week, but I'm more concerned about Kikoa's consistency. I think Kikoa just it's imperative that he can hit a couple of long throws, or else this Eagle offense isn't that good without a couple of throws to be able to open up what we want to do on the underneath side. We don't have the 2020, 2021 Bison offensive line that could literally just run A-gap power every play and win a national championship with that. We don't have that. I mean, we have a good offensive line, don't get me wrong, but that's not our offensive line. We're not 5 NFL players offensive line. We don't have that kind of firepower up there. So, I just the floor of this season has definitely gone down with this Drake loss, something that I did not see coming at all. I think anyone saw this coming at all, and with it definitely tampered the expectations of the season. But hey, there's still 10 weeks of football left for this, or 11 weeks of football left for this Eastern program. I think Coach Best has 11 weeks to coach for his job, man, because that was pretty bad. It's the last year of his contract, and I mean, losing to Drake definitely doesn't make saying goodbye to Coach Best at the end of this year any harder. So, man, I'm not completely out on Coach Best yet, but I think I'm getting close, guys. I mean, it's been pretty upsetting to just see the floor of Eastern fandom, I guess, go down and down every year the last 3 years. So, I'm really hoping for a quick turnaround for this Eastern program and stuff this next couple weeks, because it's needed, or else we're headed to some dark places with needing maybe a coaching search with our program at the place it is could be kind of tough. But man, it'll be interesting to see how everything goes. I'm excited. We have a special guest for the preview segment this week. For the Southeastern Louisiana preview, we have Dustin Helton, also known as the Rev. He hosts the Southland Sermon podcast, a podcast all about the Southland Conference. So Dustin was a Stephen F. Austin alum, I believe, and he's a big Stephen F. Austin fan who is now an old and now a new member of the Southland Conference. So he runs the podcast that talks about the Southland Conference, does a lot of research on the Southland Conference. So I brought him on to talk, get a little bit of a southern perspective on this CLA team, because I mean, shoot, man, I didn't even know there's a hurricane going on, and he let me know there's a hurricane going on. So, just keep on listening, and after that, we'll get to Around the Big Sky. Here's Dustin Helton. All right, and now we're bringing in special guest from the Southland Sermon, Father Dustin Helton, also known as the Rev. How are you doing, Dustin?
Man, I'm doing good, but you're not Kyler. What the hell? You're much better looking than him. I hope he sees that and knows that.
Oh no, I'm sure I'll what's the word? I'll live in Kyler's spirit because we all know he's been on unaliving watch this weekend. I'll call you a bum. You're a bum. There you go. That's the
There you go.
Kyler.
That's what you gotta
That's his
do.
thing. I
That's
do
it.
it too, and then people will get mad at me because they don't realize I'm joking. I've done it before in like the Tubbs Discord I did the other day, and I was like, "Oh, I'll see all you bums in a week," and then everybody got all salty at me. I was like, "Hey, I'm just imitating the saltiest of them all, Kyler Neal." All right,
Kyler Neal is like a chihuahua because he's little and full of hate. So
there you go. Me too. I'm 5'6", so me too. All of us. All right, so we are here to preview Eastern's matchup with the Southeastern Louisiana Lions again this year. Played them last year. It was a relatively competitive game. I mean, I think Eastern kind of had the upper hand in it most of the game, but it ended up being kind of competitive a lot of this game, and then Eastern kind of pulled ahead at the end with a pick six. Did you watch that game last year, Dustin?
I watched some of it. It was a little bit of hate watching in a weird way because from when SFA had previously been in the Southland, I wasn't a fan of Southeastern Louisiana, although they do honestly have probably one of the best stadiums and environments in the Southland Conference. But then I also watched it for the Eastern Washington aspect just because it's just, Eastern Washington is a fun team to both like and hate at the same time. Because, I mean, when they have talented teams, they're a fun team to watch, but that field is god awful, and so that's another reason why.
Wow.
That's another reason why I just can't like it. So, but no, I did watch some of that game last year, and I remember thinking to myself that two things. I was like, one, maybe Eastern Washington is a little better than expected, and then I think I was proven wrong on that. But then number two, I said, man, Southeastern is not as good as expected last year, and that game did show that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Eastern, like most of that game, they like looked like the better team, but at the same time, like Southeastern just kept coming back, mostly because Eastern's defense couldn't get a damn stop. But that's nothing new. So last year, Southeastern started Zachary Clement at quarterback. He didn't have like a spectacular performance through the air. He did throw 2 touchdowns, but he went 10 for 19, 80 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's not back, is he?
No, he's gone.
He's gone. And then Eli Sawyer, who is the starter this year, came in, threw 3 passes for 60 yards and a touchdown, had a 54-yard bomb on Eastern. That's the starting quarterback this upcoming year. Southeastern put up 175 yards on the ground last year. And that was kind of the story of 2023 Eastern, is like teams just ran all over us. So looking forward, this Southeastern team they lost a lot. They got a new starting quarterback. Their leading rusher from last year, you were saying he didn't really play a ton so far.
Yeah, let's start with quarterback. They had Eli Sawyer, who has been around for SLU, has played 21 games, has got about 3,000 passing yards, so he's not a slouch by any means. But then when you look at the rest of the team, Harlan Dixon is their biggest returning running back, and he had 403 yards rushing last year. When you look at the receivers, Darius Lewis is their number one threat, but again, he only had 568 last year. So a lot of they did have some very key losses in the offseason. And I need to pull up real quick because I don't remember. It wasn't Harlan Dixon who had the better game against Southern Miss at running back last week. It was Martin. It was Antonio Martin who did it. Went for 93 yards and a touchdown, 15 carries, 93 yards. So he'll probably be who you're going to be watching out of the backfield.
Martin had 15 attempts for 94 yards against Southern Miss last week. And just to touch on Southeastern's schedule this year, we don't know a whole bunch about them. We know what they were last year. We know they lost a lot of pieces, and we know they got beat pretty handedly by 2 FBS teams coming in. I think they lost to Tulane 52-0. And then they lost at Southern Miss 35-10. They showed a little bit of promise, at least defensively on film. Like you can see the talent there, but we don't know exactly what to expect. They kind of strike me similar to an Eastern build, as in I think they're a lot more talented than 3-8. Like just the actual talent there, but the results haven't come out yet for them. And so it's kind of an interesting matchup of two teams that are in similar positions. Like, Eastern had their long run of success. Southeastern also had a pretty long run of success in the playoffs. And then the last year and a little bit, I mean, Southeastern made the playoffs in 2022, but since then they've been kind of on a little bit of a downward trajectory, especially if they don't turn things around this year. I think it's a interesting matchup overall. Southeastern was picked, I believe, third in the preseason poll in the Southland Conference. Is that correct? I think that's correct.
I got to remember that. I didn't agree with the poll.
Yeah.
I thought it was a bit off. I could see them being middle of the conference. Third is I think a bit adventurous. Of course, here's the thing. I think a lot of folks are thinking that Selfo he's a good coach, right? He wins. So they're thinking that he'll have a turnaround season, but they're also comparing this to when he had Cole Kelly as a quarterback, and Cole Kelly, you don't have the same sort of talent and firepower back there now that you did when he was at SLU. So I think if anybody was putting them up in the third, I think that's a bit short-sighted because I don't think they finish. I bet they finished probably fifth, sixth in conference, which would put them right in the middle of the pack.
Yeah. So, I mean, and kind of interestingly enough, they haven't turned into a defensive school by any means, but the Southeastern teams of the past, you just remember high flying offense and almost zero defense to speak of. And the last few years, they've seemed like their defense is kind of building a little bit to the point where I almost think their defense has looked better through these 2 weeks. They obviously giving up 35 points and 52 points FBS schools isn't great, but they look like they have a decent amount of talent on the defense side of the ball. In particular, 45, whatever Peoples is his last name, I think it is. I think he's a Northern Iowa transfer. That dude looks like a monster, and he reminds me a lot of freaking AJ Simon for Albany last year. They definitely have some threats defensively that Eastern's line is going to have. They're going to have a long day if they can't step it up and play a little bit better than last week. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's weird because the Southland isn't known for its D, right? It's not a very defense heavy conference, and the last team that was really known for having a good defensive unit was UNF Austin. So any sort of defensive tightening up that they can do will help them in the conference, but you do have various sorts of high-powered offenses, whether it's the spread that Incarnate Word runs, or whether it's the run heavy that Nicholls State runs, and so in order to be a success, you have to have some sort of defense, or that you have to have a super potent offense, right? And unfortunately, they don't have a super potent offense. So any updates they can do to their defense is going to be, and to make them stronger, is going to be what they need to be successful in the conference.
For sure. And I mean, when I look at them, I think they're probably, if you have Southland has 9 teams now, or is it 10?
9. So 9, because SFA joined. Yeah. And so, and then next year they'll have UT Rio Grande Valley or UT RGV.
Gotcha. Yeah.
They will be active. And then there's rumors of other teams coming back to the conference as well, but they're not official. And so you could potentially be the Southland be a 12-team league in the next few years.
That'd be really interesting. Yeah. But I mean, looking at this year, I could see Southeastern being anywhere from third to sixth place in the conference, depending on how some of those closer games go with the middle tier teams in that conference.
Yeah, there's a lot of people picking. I mean, there's a lot of people that are still really high on Nicholls State. I'm not. Although I will say they did look good against Louisiana Tech. They looked really good. You can't really count them playing LSU because that's a beatdown that you expect to see, but they look better. But it's really, in my opinion, it's Incarnate Word's conference to lose. And then after that, you kind of there's 3 teams that could be a second place dark horse in the conference, and that's Lamar, Nicholls, or UNF Austin. And I think once you get past that, then you have Southeastern Louisiana sitting kind of a little bit of a tier below those three schools.
Yeah, which is kind of when you think about the Big Sky, kind of where we thought Eastern was before last week. So, it'll be interesting to see. I think Eastern now is probably in the bottom tier, or the middle to bottom, not the like Cal Poly Northern Colorado's of the world, but they're down there right now. Losing
I
to Drake.
mean, you lose the Drake, you don't deserve to have any sort
Yeah.
of. I get that Drake was a playoff team last year, but they played in the Pioneer League, and last year they had the privilege of losing to both the NAIA champion and the FCS national champion from 2022. So yeah, I don't think Eastern Washington really has much of a leg to stand on in the conference. No offense to the fans, but
Yeah.
I also know I'm also don't want to beat up on the fans because or even the players, because I know losing a game like that is rough, and you've probably already gotten enough crap from everybody else. So I won't beat up on y'all too much for losing to Drake.
Yeah, I got a lot of crap on Twitter. Bad. I should have shut my mouth after the Monmouth game and just been, it's Monmouth. No, I had to say Eastern was going to be really good. Yeah. Anyways, it's kind of going to be kind of an interesting matchup between kind of the bottom of the Big Sky, middle of the Southland. Probably a lot of people don't care, but it's kind of interesting I think it might be a pretty competitive game. So, are you thinking the same?
Yeah, I think so. And the reason why is just I think the Southland, I think the Southeastern Louisiana defense, obviously they're going to key on Chisholm, right? That's that's the first thing you're going to do, because Eastern Washington has one of the best players in FCS. So, and also he's a nice guy. I got to meet him last year at the national championship. Very nice guy. So, I think you're going to see that. That's what's going to happen. You're going to see that focus key in, and then what does Eastern Washington have outside of Chisholm that can pick apart the offense? If they run sort of the same scheme that they ran against Drake, Southeastern Louisiana is going to be all over that. They're going to key into like RPOs because their rivals are running team. Their rivals, Nicholls State. That's all Nicholls State does is run the damn ball. They had two running backs who ran for over 2,000 yards combined last year. So that's what they do. So I think it will be a very competitive game in that sense. And it I mean, like I said, it's a combination of Eastern not being maybe where we thought they were, but also too, Eastern probably is going to have a chip on their shoulder after losing a game like that. You would think that the players aren't very happy with losing to a non-scholarship team. I mean, while Drake is still D1, they're still viewed at a lower tier because of the non-scholarship aspect of it. So, so I think it'll be a fun game to watch. I think it'll be competitive. Initially when I looked at the Southeastern Louisiana schedule this year, I said, oh, they're going to start 0-4 right off the bat because they had the two FBS games and then they've got Eastern and then they got South Dakota State. But I don't know. They could pull this one off.
Mm-hmm.
They really and truly could because of just how lackluster is not the right word, but just how off Eastern Washington looked last week.
For sure. Another thing to note, Eastern is notorious for playing like crap in the southern humidity and heat early in September and just not performing at their level. It's supposed to be 90 degrees, 70% humidity.
Yeah. Oh, and it's 2 days removed from a hurricane moving through. So just remember that too.
Yeah. So, I mean, it definitely could be a tough matchup for Eastern just because, I mean, you're coming off of that was just brutal talking about Drake. And then now, I mean, I think Southeastern's about as borderline opposite at Drake as you can kind of get defense-wise. I think Drake is kind of hey, they maybe don't have the most talent in the world defensively, but they're coached very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Southeastern Louisiana has a good amount of talent on that on the defense side of the ball. I'm not saying they're not coached well, but like
they're very coached well.
Yeah, the coaching isn't necessarily. I think the talent is there that Drake doesn't have, and so it'll be interesting to see how Eastern's offense looks because, I mean, they did put up 32 points, but it was not like it wasn't like an impressive 32 points. It felt like a drag. That whole game, it felt like the offense was off. So, like you said, I think Eastern's really got to dip their hand into the bag of tricks that they clearly didn't against Drake. It definitely seemed like they were trying to kind of hide their hand from the Big Sky teams, and it kind of bit them in the ass. That I mean, it's almost like the same way that Eastern used to beat a couple FBS schools is like they're trying not to show their hand, and that's exactly what happened to Eastern in that game. So I think Eastern really has to open up the playbook, because I don't know if they're going to be able to just run it down Southeastern Louisiana's throat like Coach Best is going to want to.
Well, I mean, if you think about, so just to give you an idea of where they stood last year, this is just some stats for you that I have I had pulled up. So last year, Southeastern was they averaged 149 yards rush defense a game. That put them 55th in the FCS, fourth in the conference. Their pass defense was they allowed 252 yards per game, which put them at 107 in FCS, sixth in the conference. Their total defense basically was 94th in the FCS, fifth in the conference. So it's not like you're going against a powerhouse of a defense. You're not even like you're going against the mid-tier of a defense. It's a pretty weak defense that SLU has from last year with some of the losses they had too. Now, obviously, they brought in some folks, and again, I don't think Selfo wants to have another 3-8 year because, or 3-1 year, because that seat's going to get a little bit warmer under him. So I think they'll be stronger, but it's not like you're going against a gang busting sort of defense that's going to necessarily stop the run. I think they'll do a better job preventing the pass, honestly.
Yeah, we'll see. Honestly, I think part of why I'm keying in on the run game is just Kiko didn't look very good last week through the air. I mean, that he was efficient in his completion numbers, but like stretching the ball down the field at all, he was just off. Like, we had Miles Williams wide open for a post for a touchdown at one point. The ball was off. It was throwing towards the defender, and it just threw the whole play off. It felt like he was just kind of missing those medium to long distance throws that Eastern kind of needs to be able to open up the underneath routes that they're so effective with Chisholm and stuff. So I think at least Eastern offense, SLU defense, if Eastern can connect on a few long-ish balls, I think that opens things up tremendously, and it gives them the opportunity to move their offense the way they want to. But if Kiko is off and he can't hit that ball, Eastern's defense becomes a lot more predictable for Eastern standards. It's a lot of bubble screen, slant, run, slant, run, bubble screen, 3 or 4 plays over and over again. And that's kind of what we saw in the Drake game.
Yeah.
But for me, I think the more interesting side of the ball is Eastern's defense, they've been a up and down, just emotional mess the last 2 weeks. Like, they play 3 quarters of really good defensive ball against Monmouth and then just totally break down in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Then, kind of a similar story in the Drake game is first quarter, hey, they look good. Drake didn't move the ball at all. Second quarter, you give Drake 30, 40 yards and 15-yard penalties. So it's like, okay, cool, they scored, but we gave them that. Cool. And then all of a sudden, we just have all these breakdowns in coverage in the second half. And it's just like, why are we still having these issues with, it's a lot of just coaching stuff, like being aligned right and not busting your coverage, which is part of the reason why our last defensive coordinator was fired. So, you got to hope that Eastern can just, if they line up and they're not busting coverages, they're a solid defense. It's literally just getting lined up and being in the right place at the right time that Eastern has struggled with so bad.
Yeah.
But, SLU, they don't have the super firepower, but neither did Drake. Drake was not a good offensive team last year. They put up 35 points. You know what I mean? So that's definitely a matchup that it'll be interesting to see.
I kind of have wondered if Eastern Washington was looking past Drake a little bit, because it's Drake. Sure. It's, forgetting the fact that, yes, they were a playoff team. They got absolutely smoked in the first round by North Dakota State, but that was going to happen. And they may have been looking past them, looking at even a little past SLU, looking at future schedule, and that's not a good thing. So I don't see them making that same mistake. But But I mean, it's also going to be, like I said, a weird week because you got Hurricane Francine that's going to make landfall in southern Louisiana tomorrow, right? Hammond isn't on the coast. It's it's on the North Shore Lake Pontchartrain, but it's not. So it's kind of weird because it's on Lake Pontchartrain, but it's not directly on the coastline. So they probably do have they. I don't think Pontchartrain is going to have the storm surge issues that like the Louisiana Gulf Coast would. But to that point, the players are going to now lose a day of practice, right? Potentially two because
Maybe.
of the storm,
Yeah.
right? Maybe thankfully it's supposed to move out pretty quick. So then you got to wonder. You got to wonder is what sort of impact does this storm have on the game too? I mean, we say living by the coast, oh, it's just a category one. Category one still pretty strong. I mean, it's still a decently strong hurricane when it comes, or the storm whenever it comes to winds. I mean, you got 90-mile-an-hour winds. It's going to do some damage. So hopefully it misses Hammond. Hopefully it doesn't impact Eastern Washington traveling in. Hopefully it doesn't impact players. Everybody keeps safe and we're able to have football on Saturday. But I would also keep an eye out to see what happens with the weather. But assuming it goes through, it blows through, and then it's just a weird week, and it could be a little bit of I don't say an emotionally taxing week, but going through a storm like that, having to ride it out, worried about stuff like that, it does tax you. So you got to wonder if there may be a little mental fatigue on the Southeastern players by going through this. But at the same time, too, the game is in Hammond, Louisiana. Southeastern loves to play in Hammond, Louisiana. They love their home stadium. The Southeastern fans do get up for games there. Um, they'll love the fact that they got another Big Sky opponent coming in. And I think it'll be a fun one to watch, honestly.
Yeah, I bet this is a similar-ish game to last year. Who's on the winning end of it at this point, I'm not 100% sure. I think Eastern is probably on paper the better team, but they have to perform better than last. Like they just have to play better. It felt like the whole, like you said, like they're overlooking Drake a little bit. Guys just didn't come out with the same level of energy that they came out for the Monmouth game, and it just like, at least defensively, like it just didn't quite feel right.
Yeah.
So I think having full scholarship FCS opponent, an opponent that they beat last year when Eastern was not good. So I think I like Eastern's chances to win this game. I think they'll be able to run the ball a decent amount. I think they'll be able to hit a deep shot or two, hopefully. Like that's the type of thing that Eastern has to do, I think, in their offense, which we'll see if it's happening. Also, quick injury report, I guess here. It looks like, I don't know, Eastern might be out of a couple of key starters this week. I mean, Jacob Newsom, who has been one of Eastern's starting defensive tackles all year, he was on crutches after the game last week.
Ooh.
Eastern also, Nolan Olm just left at some point in the game. Someone took his helmet and didn't let him go back in. Don't know what happened. Don't know when it happened, but that was something that happened. You have Wesley Garrett, another receiver that is on the two deep. He's out, which look like he might be out for a while with a knee injury. You also have a starting corner, Darian Sampson, just left the game at halftime. Like Drake Bulldogs did a number on Eastern. So, I think it's a lot more even of a matchup than we thought it was going to be about 6 days ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if we had had this talk last week, I would have picked Eastern Washington by probably 17 to 20 points. But now, honestly, if this was with the betting line, it'd be a pick 'em because I'm thinking it's going to be a 3-point game either side of the ball. Like I think it's going to be a tight one, like a 31-28 type score, maybe 35-31, but like nothing bigger than a touchdown margin between the two teams.
Yeah, I'm about right there with you. I figured it'd be about 35-31 type of game. That was kind of what I was thinking too. We'll see. I think it really just, I think the biggest like factor in this game is, can the Eastern defense get fucking lined up? Like that is my biggest question, because that's just been like in the Monmouth game, they got caught looking at the sideline for a call, and then the other team snapping the ball, and like just little shit like that. Hey, it's Coach Sanders' first and second game coordinating a defense, but also we can't be doing that. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
So,
And I think, and you always hear things like, let's see how the team comes out first drive, see how the team comes out first quarter. Not this game. Let's see how the team starts the second half, because that's been the Eastern Washington struggle a bit. You can't give ask Eastern Washington for a change for $1 because they're not going to give you 4 quarters. And that's kind of what you're seeing. And so I would just say that's going to be the litmus test, is whoever has the ball second half, whether it's SLU or Eastern Washington, who comes out and does more right away. I think that's going to be your telltale sign for how the half evolves. If Eastern Washington can fix their second half woes, and if they're in a good spot going in the second half, then probably should be fine. But Selfo, like I said, Selfo's a good coach. He knows how to adjust. And so, that's just what I would be looking at it. Not the first, second quarter, but starting third quarter, seeing what Eastern does.
Very good point. Well, I think that just about wraps it up for the preview for us. Why don't you give a quick shout out to all the different shows and stuff that you're on? Because you're on a ton of them, it seems like.
Well, yeah. You can find the Southland Sermon with the Rev on part of the FCS Fans Nation network. Same place you'd probably see this too. And then the FCS Fans Nation network has other shows. The Sunday show with Matt, Jamie, Kyler, Jackrabbit Illustrated is part of it. Fight on Montana is part of it. But then more than that too, there's other great FCS content to follow. Zach with Blue Blood, Sam Herder, Kevin with and some of FCS FCS Nation Radio. If you want to follow HBCUs, HBCU Nightly is legit one of the best things I've ever watched in my life. So just make sure you like and support and follow all of the FCS content, because for the most part, other than the local beat writers, it's a little different for up north, but for the rest of the country, there's not much coverage of this subdivision, at least at a national level. So this is a good way to get knowledge on the division, to watch other games, and also too with shows like this, it's y'all are part of it. So it's all your support, all the things you ask, like the FCS Fans Nation pod, things like that. That's just what helps the subdivision grow in terms of folks' awareness of it.
For sure. And keep an eye out for Rev in a bunny suit in Frisco this year.
That's I've had multiple people ask if South Dakota State goes back if I wear the bunny suit again, and the answer this time legit is I don't know. The 2 times I wore it was because all the FCS Fan Stations podcasters, we all sit in a row in the end zone, and I was like, I will get us on TV really quickly. And so the first time it was super creepy, and then the second time it wasn't as much, but we still got on TV. So I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. If, let's say, Eastern Washington were to make it to Frisco, would I show up in an Eagle costume? Perhaps. Like, it's not just limited to South Dakota State. But the whole reason the bunny suit happened was because I made a bet with one of the Jackrabbit Illustrated podcasters. He said that if I showed up in a bunny suit, he would call me South Dakota's favorite, or the state of South Dakota's favorite podcaster. And he did. And he did it on a show with Coach Stig, who was their former coach who retired. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so that's why it happened. But it was a blast to do. I would also, my other advice to this is, I know Frisco, the game is already sold out, but I know Eastern Washington's been. I know you've won, but I was also there last time whenever you guys played against North Dakota State. But I would say, even if your team's out there, go. It's so much fun to go to the game, just even in a passing interest, because I think year over year, it's gotten better. The environment's gotten better. All the weekend around it has gotten better. A lot of the local establishments are getting really involved in the game and things like that. So if you got the opportunity, or if you're in the area, go to it. It's really worth it.
For sure. Yeah. Well, thanks a ton for coming on and getting us the Southland / someone that lives in the South perspective. I had no idea there was a hurricane happening. I'm a genius, dude. So thanks again for coming on, Rev. And maybe we'll talk to you later.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks to the Rev for coming on. And now we are on to Around the Big Sky / Patty's Picks. I've been calling it Patty's Picks. I've been posting Patty's Picks on Twitter, just giving people an idea of what I'm thinking, what I'm predicting to happen. I've been doing okay the first couple of weeks, except for Eastern. Eastern and Montana shit in the bed against North Dakota. But anyways, we'll go through all the Big Sky matchups this week, and just I'll give you a quick prediction, quick idea of what's going on. I think the Big Sky's a fun conference. I think you guys should know more about the Big Sky as well. Kicking off first, obviously, last week we just talked about the Drake situation with Eastern for half an hour. Eastern next week is going to Southeastern Louisiana. Obviously, we just talked about that. I'm picking Eastern in a 38 to 32 type of game, competitive and close. I think Eastern has the upper hand most of the game, but then at the end, it starts it's a little closer. Maybe, I don't know. I think it'll be 38 to 32. That's my score prediction for the Eastern game. Moving on to Idaho. Idaho beats FBS Wyoming with their backup quarterback Jack Wagner, who got a little bit shaken up. Nick Josephet came in, third string quarterback at the end there. But the story of the day was Idaho's defense looks really, really good. They're going to be really, really good. And in the Big Sky Podcast Network power rankings, Idaho was number 1, ranked ahead of Montana State, which was a little surprising to me. I think Montana State still looks like the better team overall right now. But, Idaho offensively hasn't looked amazing, but they did enough in the rushing game. And the Idaho offensive line looks like they've taken a step up, to me anyways, at least half a step up from last year. Pass protection is still a little sketchy, but I think they're going to be running the ball a lot anyways with the backup quarterbacks in. Idaho hosts UAlbany next weekend. I will be at this game, which is kind of funny. The last game I saw at the KB Dome was UAlbany beating Idaho. And so, last year, UAlbany knocked Idaho out of the playoffs. That UAlbany team is a whole different football team this year. They don't look very good. I think Idaho wins this one by 2 or 3 scores. Let's say I'll probably say 2 scores. I think Idaho wins this one 20 30 31 to let's say 31 to 17. That's my prediction for the Idaho UAlbany game. Idaho State beat Western Oregon 50-10 last week. D2 school, it was bloodbath, whatever. D2 school, don't really care. This week, Idaho State hosts. Oh wait, no. Are they going to North Dakota? Hold up. Let me. This is in North Dakota. Idaho State travels to the Olaris Center where UND just knocked off Montana, which we will hit on in a little bit. But Idaho State, they look like they're going to be better than last year defensively. They look like they're going to run the ball more than they did last year, but they're still Idaho State. I don't think they're to the middle I don't think they're on the edge of a middle to top tier Big Sky school quite yet. I think North Dakota handles this one. I think Idaho State keeps it a little close in the first half, and then North Dakota kind of pulls ahead in the second half. But it would be really funny if Idaho State was able to win this game. I'm taking North Dakota by 2 scores. Let's go next game. Next game is Montana versus North Dakota. Montana had a 24-7 lead going into was it 24-7? I think it was 24-7. Yeah, 24-7 lead going into halftime of North Dakota versus Montana game up in Grand Forks. And shit, man, North Dakota just put it to them in the second half. The Grizz offensive line looked horrible. Kiali Ayat for Montana was the starting quarterback, and the quarterback for most of the game brought in Fife for a little bit. He did not look good. Ayat didn't look spectacular, but he also didn't look horrible. A lot of people are putting a lot of blame on Ayat for the second half collapse and not being able to score anything offensively in the second half. I put a lot more blame on that Montana offensive line because I honestly think Ayat, his ability to just avoid tacklers got Montana out of a lot of bad situations. Let me really quickly. I want to see how many sacks Montana gave up because this was a bloodbath on the offensive line side of things. Wow, they really don't have sacks in the dang. Well, whatever. Montana gave up a lot of sacks, and Kiali Ayat kind of got their way out of a number of sacks, kind of slithered his way out of a number of sacks and saved Montana a lot of yardage. Montana next week, they play, who do they play? They play Morehead State. Morehead State, I believe, is a Pioneer League school. Let me confirm that. Yes, they're a Pioneer League school. Montana should smoke them at Wagriz. I believe it's at Wagriz, correct? Yes. Yeah, Montana big-ish in this game. I think this gives them a chance to kind of work out some things offensively. But if this game's close, I think panic buttons start to get pushed a little bit more in Missoula, but we will see. Moving on to next game. Cal Poly got smoked by Stanford. Nothing really exciting. Cal Poly plays Western Oregon this week. This game might be a little bit closer than it should be, but I think Cal Poly finally gets their first win of the season against Division II Western Oregon. Northern Colorado went to Colorado State last week. Next week, Northern Colorado plays Abilene Christian. This should be an interesting matchup. So Northern Colorado, they looked competitive-ish with UIW in week one, who is supposed to be a pretty decent team. Kyler, not a big UIW guy. He doesn't think UIW is that good, but the Northern Colorado defense looked pretty solid. The offense still doesn't look great. They were frisky with Colorado State for like a quarter, and then Colorado State pulled ahead. I think Abilene Christian wins this one. Abilene Christian looked pretty good against Texas Tech. They lost in overtime to the Red Raiders. Last week they played West Georgia, who is the newest Division One, the newest FCS member. They just moved up from Division II last week. West Georgia's looked pretty good, and Abilene Christian won 38-24. MacGyver, I think it's Matthew MacGyver is the name of the Abilene Christian quarterback. He has led the FCS in passing through 2 weeks. I think Abilene Christian puts a lot of points up on Northern Colorado. I don't think this one's close. I think Abilene wins this one by, I don't know, 3 or 4. 4 or 5 scores. I think this one's not close at all. Moving on. Montana State hosted Maine last weekend. They did Montana State things. They rushed the ball for like 400 yards. I think 344 yards. And Scott Ray Humphrey, his stat line was 4 carries, 110 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Averaged 27 yards a carry. Tommy Malott had 5 rushes for 66 yards. Adam Jones had 4 rushes for 63 yards and 2 touchdowns as well. It was just, that Montana State does that to people sometimes. This week they are off. They have the bye this week, and then the following week they play Mercyhurst, the other newest FCS program. So we will skip Montana State. Weber State hosted Portland State last weekend, our first conference Big Sky matchup. Weber State looked pretty good. This was a competitive game through 3 quarters. I think it was only, it was a 19-10 after 3 quarters was the score. And then Weber State really put it on them in the 4th quarter. It's Weber State. They kind of go as Richie goes. They're a really good defense. Their rushing defense looked incredible in this game. Portland State had 145 yards rushing, but they also rushed the ball 40 times. And, that's holding them just 3.5 yards a carry. That was the number 2 rushing offense in the league last year. So, Weber State looks really pretty good defensively. Kamari Bailey's a beast, as well as that other edge guy. On the Portland State side of things, I think the biggest bright spot for them was that linebacker number 7, Peyton Wing, looked really good on defense. Dante Sashary didn't do much, but Quincy Craig did look effective on the ground against Weber State, which almost no one else did. So he averaged 5 yards a carry, 14 carries for 71 yards. I think Portland State will hit on them. They're hosting South Dakota next weekend. I think South Dakota is not a team that really blows people out too bad, just for their style of play. But I think South Dakota puts it on them pretty heavily. One of the other positives for Portland State is their rushing defense looked okay, but I think South Dakota wins that one by 2 or 3 scores. Pick takes South Dakota over Portland State. Weber State, if they can get their offense going, I think they're a pretty dangerous team. But they have a kind of a tough matchup here with Lamar this week. Lamar is kind of a sneaky good team. They're a solid Southland program that last year, I mean, Idaho played them last year and beat them pretty soundly, but overall, they're a good program, man. They ended up being in the top half of the Southland, and they're not a walkover game by any means. I think Weber State wins this one. I think they win it a pretty competitive, close game by like 9 points, 10 points is what I'm gonna say. Weber State beats Lamar by. Other thing with Weber State is Bankston looks very healthy. He had 133 yards in this game, which I said Portland State's rushing defense looked good, but they gave up 316 yards on the ground. Now that I'm looking at this, I think a lot of that was just in the box. They look good just with the eye test, maybe not so much statistically. Richie Munoz had 219 yards. He looked streaky as Richie does, not super efficient, but got the job done. I think that's just going to be Richie Munoz until he's not. NAU held in there with Arizona for a half. I think they led Arizona at the half. We hardly know anything about Northern Arizona. Ty Pennington is the quarterback for them. He hasn't looked good so far, but they've been playing. Well, he didn't look amazing against Arizona. He looked pretty good against Lincoln. Don't really know what to think. I mean, he went 14 for 24 for 84 yards, 3.5 yards a reception or a pass for Pennington. Didn't look exceptional against Arizona. They needed a trick play for the touchdown run by Isaiah Eastman. I believe he's a running back, he's a receiver. Defensively, they looked okay to solid. They held their own. Alex McLaughlin had 11 tackles as well as 9 for Amon Allen and Tommy Ellis as well. Also 9 for Mike Carrion. I think he's a DB. Oh, D lineman. Wow, I'm totally off. But anyways, defensively they showed some promise, but we don't really know what to expect for them. Who do they play? They play Utah Tech this week. It's kind of a sneaky, interesting game. I think, Utah Tech isn't good, but it's an FCS school, and we'll have some idea of what Northern Arizona is after this week. I think NAU wins this game by a couple scores. It's a competitive game for a half, and then NAU wins by 14. All right. And hopefully we can have any idea of what NAU is after this week. Sac State lost to Fresno State. Sac State, they're just struggling with their offensive identity. They did not look great in this game. They weren't able to run the ball like I thought they might be able to. I mean, Fresno State's a pretty good squad. They put up 46 points, but offensively, Sac State just doesn't look that good. They're stuck between the two quarterbacks. They're the tail case of they have two quarterbacks. They don't have one. They don't have a quarterback. They have two quarterbacks. You know what I mean? This game, Caden Bennett was kind of a crazy version of Caden Bennett where he's like, makes a crazy play with his legs, a very nice throw, and then throws a pick, makes another nice play, then turns it over and fumbles the ball. That's exactly what he did in this game. He only threw the ball. He only completed 5 passes on 13 attempts for 135 yards, threw a pick, threw a touchdown. But Carson Conklin showed a lot of promise in this game through the air anyways. He had 219 yards on 20 completions, 37 attempts. He wasn't perfect by any means, but he looked a hell of a lot better than Caden Bennett in this game, which is interesting to see. So, I mean, Sac State was able to run the ball when Caden Bennett was in there just because they had the threat of Caden Bennett pulling the read option. It really made it tough for Fresno's DNs to collapse. With Conklin in there, they just collapsed and really stuffed the run, but Conklin was able to get it done through the air as well. Overall, Sac State looked better offensively with Conklin in there, and they just looked like they weren't going to turn the ball over as much, which has been a huge problem for them. But defensively is where the problem was in this game for Sac State, man. They got shredded by Fresno State's passing attack. Mikey Keene, Fresno State's quarterback, went for 24 for 35, 358 yards to the air, 2 touchdowns. He also threw 2 picks. Both of those were bad picks by him, but 358 yards through the air, 238 of those went to one player, Mac Delana, who, man, he was just wide open all night. Sacs secondary did not look good against this Fresno State squad. Shout out to former Eastern receivers coach and interim offensive coordinator Pat McCann, who's now the offensive coordinator at Fresno State. That dude, he's a dog. He's a very good coach. But Sac State didn't look great. Moving forward, they play Nichols this week, who is they won the Southland last year. They're definitely a run it type of team. Will be interesting. I think Sac State beats them just because they match up pretty well with them. Sac State's relative strength defensively is the rushing defense. I don't think Nichols has the firepower through the air to really beat them too bad. Beat them too bad in the secondary wise. Anyways, they don't have Fresno State talent on that back end. I think Sac State wins that one by a score, or they'll win that one by 2 or 3 scores. I think the real question is what happens with Caden Bennett, Carson Conklin, because I really don't think their defense is good enough to put up with the sways up and down of a 2-quarterback system this year. It's not a Asher O'Hara / what Jake Dunaway type. It's not that kind of mix where they complement each other really well. They kind of are yin and yang, as in Conklin won't throw a bunch of bad picks, but he's not very dynamic on the ground, but he's consistent and makes throws. Caden Bennett, very dynamic on the ground, but very turnover prone, and you never know what the hell he's going to do. You get the feeling that Conklin's going to be the guy there, but we'll see. Tao Tolliver has looked very good, though. Done talking about Sac State. Sac State will beat Nichols, in my opinion. Last one, UC Davis. They played a competitive game with Texas A&M Commerce. Competitive, but like Davis was in control that whole game. It was 9-0 after the first half, and really, the only reason it was 9-0 and it wasn't 21-0 was the Davis offensive line just kind of struggled against this Texas A&M Commerce front. What Lamb Larson did have, he had 130 something yards. Something, my ESPN app just wigged out. I don't know what happened there, but he had like 130 yards on the ground, if I'm not mistaken. But it was kind of like last year Anthony Woods for Idaho, where there wasn't much running room and he turned a lot of nothing into something. That's kind of how it really looked with Lamb Larson this week. That's just my opinion. I wasn't very impressed with the Davis offensive line, and Hastings looked good when he had space to throw the ball in, having space to throw the dink and dunks. But when he had to fit the ball into tight windows, he wasn't excellent, especially down in the red zone. Their red zone offense wasn't great. They had to settle for field goals a ton. They just didn't have the meat up front to really run it down Texas A&M Commerce's throat, who is a medium to probably a middle tier Southland Conference team who is not necessarily known for their rushing defense or anything like that. Hastings looked good, very good when he had open field to work with, but when he got clamped or when he got into those tight spaces in the red zone, he just did not look excellent. It's just not his style necessarily. I think he's more of a dink and dunk type of quarterback. But this week they play Southern Utah, who is fresh off of beating FBS UTEP. So, that'll be kind of a fun matchup to see. Former Big Sky Southern Utah, they've been they've been a program on the rise for sure with that head coach that they have down there. I can't remember his name, but the game is at Eccles Coliseum in Utah, so it'll be an interesting matchup. I think Davis is the better team, but I think they really need to get their offensive line play looking better, or else I don't think that they don't have the horses for a playoff run if they can't get the offensive line going better. Just because Larison can't do everything by himself for 11 weeks. You know what I'm saying? Let's see. 185 yards so far for Larison this year. Lamb Larison is still most of their offense. Davis is what's his name? CJ Hutton for Davis looked really good at the receiver, CJ Hutton. But defensively, David Meyer, man, the Cal Poly transfer for Davis looked really good. I think he had 15 tackles and a pick 6 in this game. He won co-defensive player of the week honors in the Big Sky, along with Keyshawn James Newby, who had 3 sacks and 3 TFLs versus Wyoming. Should have had 4 sacks. So I think Davis wins this game. I think they're good enough to win this game, but I think that's a really close game. I think Davis only wins that game by a score, 7-point game. That should be all of the games. I'm going with Idaho over Albany, Eastern over Southeast Louisiana, North Dakota over Idaho State, Montana over Morehead State, South Dakota over Portland State, Abilene Christian over Northern Colorado, Weber State over Lamar, Davis over Southern Utah, and Cal Poly over Western Oregon, Northern Arizona over Utah Tech, Sac State over Nichols. That has been Patty's Picks. That has been the podcast episode. Thank you guys. It's been a strange week. I meant to do a reaction episode. I recorded it a couple times. It wasn't working. Needed some time to just debrief from that performance. But on to Southeastern Louisiana. Let's hope for an Eagle win this weekend. I think we can do it. That Southeastern Louisiana front is talented. So it'll be an interesting matchup. But here's to hoping Eastern can get their shit together. Man, go